Malls of Singapore aren't just for you to indulge in some retail therapy, as they also are a culinary paradise brimming with incredible dining options for every taste and craving. So let's check out some of the best food spots inside these malls, ranging from hidden food stalls to classic eateries where you can grab a quick and tasty bite.
Rolling? Hi everyone, I'm Neil Patil, co-founder and chief operating officer at Veena World. I'm also a father and a very curious traveler. I'm on a mission to explore Singapore. Why Singapore? Well, it's because Singapore was the first country that I ticked off my travel bucket list, and after 35 odd trips to Singapore, I still feel I haven't seen Singapore fully. But if I'm to explore Singapore, I really need a local expert. Enter RJ.
Hi, I'm RJ, Area Director of the Singapore Tourism Board and your go-to guy for everything that's local and legendary. I've been in India for 2 years now, and when Neil came to me and said, I want to know more about Singapore, I thought I might just know the guy for you. So here we are, uncovering hidden gems and tracing everything that makes Singapore so special to the both of us.
Join me and Renjie as we reveal some of the must-visit eateries and restaurants in Singapore's famous malls.
So the last time we chatted, you asked me a very interesting question, which is when you're in the midst of shopping, what do you do if you need to eat?
Yeah.
And I think people don't realize, or we always underestimate how physically taxing the act of shopping is, because you get so absorbed with picking out stuff, the best souvenirs, the best stuff to bring home, that you don't think about actually, when it comes down to, I really need to eat, it's lunchtime, then you start planning what to eat, right?
Yeah.
I always think that's like a really fascinating topic because I'm constantly thinking about food when I'm shopping.
So you mentioned two words, right? Or two things to describe food or eating at a shopping center.
Yeah.
One was the basement,
Yeah.
and the other one was family restaurant.
Yes.
So help us navigate both of these things. Let's start with the basement.
With the basement. So I will say, first of all, any shopping mall in Singapore, you always have the food court. Right? And the food court is almost like a hawker center, but brought indoors with AC, so very nice experience. But let's put that aside because I think it's a safe option. Right?
Correct.
In terms of the basement, now I think all Singaporean shopping malls are organized in a very unique way, I would say. Now that I think about it, it's a very strange way of designing a shopping mall. The ground floor is always going to have the glitziest boutiques. So it's always going to be your luxury boutiques, really nice, expensive stuff, right? When you go upwards, so you take the escalators upwards, you get a mix. You get a mix of different types of, smaller shops, you get some restaurants and so on, which we'll come back to later. But when you go down, when you take the escalators down into the basement, that's where it gets interesting because it almost becomes like a whole different type of mall altogether because you get smaller stalls, yes, but what's really interesting and fascinating about these basements is that it's also where you have the concession stands. So these are little, almost like street food stands, little stalls that are not huge, but that's where you get the biggest range of food. It's oftentimes, meant to kind of be like snacks. So you take it and you go, they give it to you in a little whatever, Tupperware or a little plastic bag or whatever. And I think that's a fascinating way to eat, especially if, you feel like you want to keep moving on the go. You don't want to sit down and break your momentum for shopping, right? And so one of the most fascinating, I think, examples of basements is in Takashimaya. Now, Takashimaya is a Japanese department store that's
Takashimaya on Orchard Road.
On Orchard Road, right? And it's really like, I think the OG, like iconic department store that when I think of department stores, I think of Takashimaya. Really lovely stuff that they sell. But again, in the basement, they have a giant food hall. It's almost like a food village, right? Where you have easily upwards of 50 stalls. And they're everything from Japanese bakeries to little like cake shops to, there's of course a food court there, but that's on this side. There's a supermarket there, that's on this side. But you also do have very, very interesting street food that we have in Singapore.
Okay.
And one of them is curry puff. Have you had a curry puff in Singapore?
Well, whenever I travel, anything associated with a curry is what I avoid, right? Even
that's
green
not
curry,
what I
no,
came to
like
travel
no,
for.
like I don't do that.
Love a good green curry. Okay, so a curry puff is Singapore's answer to a samosa. Right?
Okay.
But we do it slightly differently in that the pastry is very different. And so this one is almost like a flaky layered pastry. It's
Okay.
semicircular in shape, almost like a half moon style. It's deep fried. And inside, instead of just like the only aloo and peas, I guess sometimes, it's almost like a molten type of curry inside. So when you bite into it, it's piping hot. You have to be careful. But this one place does it particularly well because they not only have, the plain flavor, but they have like a chicken flavor curry puff. They have like a sardine flavor curry puff. They have like an aloo flavor and a whole range of different snacks as well, right? So that to me is one great example of a street food snack that you can have refueling in the middle of a day while shopping. 1A curry puff in the basement of Takashimaya. I'm drooling now just thinking about it.
I think you've convinced me to add a curry puff while traveling to Singapore, and I'm quite surprised. Like I haven't had that or even heard of that in all of these trips to Singapore that
Yeah.
I've really done. So that was the basement. What is the family restaurant? I think Renjie, I think I know what you're going to talk about.
Yes.
So if you're talking about family restaurants, also help us bust this one myth.
Yeah.
Restaurants in a shopping mall which are not in the basement are often thought of as expensive. Is that the case?
So it can be the case in the sense that there are very nice restaurants. So, your like cafes, your very expensive sort of formal sit down types of places. But there are also these institutions and oftentimes Asian cuisine, where they are sit down restaurants, but they serve food at very, very accessible prices, right? So for instance, me growing up, that's what I ate when I went, on a weekend out with my parents to the shopping mall. And it's everything from, I don't know, like Japanese food, Korean food, where it's a proper sit-down place, and you have a whole range of sushi, of sashimi, you have your, rice bowls and everything like that, to also like East Asian types of cuisines. For instance, one of my favorite places to go to in Singapore, and what I think of as the quintessential dim sum in Singapore, is a place called Crystal Jade.
The one that has a chain of restaurants across.
It's a chain.
Yeah,
so
okay.
in many shopping malls that you go to in Singapore, you'll find it incredibly consistent. But they are known not only for their dim sum, but also just sort of, like served Chinese dishes. So you have it also Cantonese food in the evening, where it's more got to do with the noodles and the dishes and so on. But that to me is the gold standard of dim sum in Singapore.
Which is your favorite dim sum?
Ooh, oh, that's a tough one. Okay, so I think the main thing that I always go for is congee, and I think in particular Crystal Jade does a terrific congee, just silky, they have a whole range of different sort of flavors you can choose from, add-ins and flavors and vegetarian ones too. But that to me is like the most comforting bowl, especially on a rainy day. But the one star dim sum that I would go for at Crystal Jade and any other restaurant to see if it's going to be a good restaurant is the turnip cake. I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah. But what is a congee, Renjie? Because many listeners may not even know what a congee is.
So a congee is a rice porridge.
Okay.
And it's essentially porridge, rice that's been boiled down in stock usually.
Yeah.
And it's boiled down until it really breaks down. So the entire, soupy kind of rice situation thickens up. It's almost like a khichdi if you cook a khichdi for like a couple hours more.
Yeah.
And it often contains vegetables. It often contains, like meat or, eggs, preserved eggs and so on. So it's just, again, it's like a hug in a bowl, I would say.
Awesome. So a turnip cake is your favorite.
Turnip
dim
cake
sum.
is my
I'm sure
favorite.
we'll do another episode on just the dim sum or the yum cha brunch very soon.
Yeah.
But, of course, we've spoken about Orchard Road on the past episode. We spoke about eating at malls. Another thing that Singapore has been known for, and all of my trips in the 1990s and 2000s were about the merlion on Sentosa Island.
Oh.
But of late, I've heard that the massive merlion that was the symbol of Singapore doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it took a holiday. It's left.
So let's do the next episode on Sentosa Island.
Yes.
How would you describe Sentosa Island in a short word, or like a short phrase?
So I can't give you a word, but I can give you a short phrase. And I would say that Sentosa to me is lush, tropical island.
Awesome. So the next time, let's just sit down and discuss Sentosa Island and why you call it a lush tropical island.
Yeah.
So see you on the next episode then.
I'm excited.
Awesome.